Relax, it was just a prank, baby. Everyone knows you wouldn't touch the intern, my wife joked while our co-workers laughed at a deepfake of me with her. I disappeared without a word. Years later she saw me again at a gala as a billionaire CEO. The night started with that sharp, nasal, wine-soaked laughter. It still echoes in my head. Someone slammed the table so hard their mellow glass tipped, bleeding a dark stain onto the pristine white linen. But I was frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth, a lonely shrimp skewer staring back at me, utterly oblivious to the venom in the air. That slideshow. God, that slideshow. Behind me, projected huge on the wall, were fake screenshots, text bubbles with my name on them, saying things I never wrote. You looked amazing in that pencil skirt today. Meet me in the copy room after lunch. A winking emoji. A selfie I never took, manipulated with the blurred silhouette of a woman standing too close, her name tag just fuzzy enough to let your imagination run wild. The background, though? That was unmistakable. My office. I'd seen that pathetic pothose plant in the corner every morning for 11 years. And then the punchline, a deepfake video. My face, superimposed onto some B-movie sex scene, awkwardly thrusting, overlaid with a laugh track and obnoxious emojis. A voice moaned, "The zoning board can wait." The room erupted. They roared, doubled over, practically drooling with laughter. Even the city treasurer wiped tears from his eyes, his wife nudging him, giggling. I told you Paul had a wild side. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, blinking through the projector light, my throat so dry it ached. I was trying to figure out which emotion to let win, nausea, pure rage, utter confusion, or searing shame. In the end, none of them did. Numbness swallowed them all. Rachel, my wife, was right next to me, her cheeks flushed from the wine and, frankly, the attention. She raised her glass and winked at the crowd. Oh, come on, he's not mad. It's his birthday. Lighten up, Paul. She leaned in, the smell of Cabernet and self-satisfaction radiating off her. It's just a joke, honey. Everyone knows you'd never sleep with the intern. Then, in a low voice, just for me, although, you do look at her like you'd like to. I turned to her. Slowly. Her smile faltered. What did you do? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, just for her ears. Oh, relax, she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You're too sensitive. I had to spice things up a bit. You've been so boring lately. That word. Boring. It landed harder than any of the lies on the screen. I stood up. Someone whistled. Ooh, the man of the hour is angry. Rachel waved her hands frantically. No, he just needs some air. He'll be back. Paul, sit down, the cake is coming. But I didn't look back. I walked past the rows of what I now knew were fake friends and civic parasites who had laughed heartily at my public flogging. Past Councilman Hardy, who muttered something like, "That's what happens when you marry up." Past the mayor, whose face was already sour, his eyes glued to his phone, probably drafting a statement about inappropriate content and respect in public office. He left before dessert. The rest of them stayed, pretending not to notice the gaping void of my empty chair. The intern quit the next morning. Just disappeared. No letter, no email. I learned later she moved back home, crying that her career was ruined. HR issued a memo about sensitive content and workplace integrity, a polite way of saying, we're covering our asses because someone turned a city planner into a laughingstock. By noon, my inbox was frozen. Flagged for review. My access card stopped working at 3 p.m. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I didn't even pack my desk. I left my world's okayest urban planner mug next to the filing cabinet and walked out with nothing but the clothes on my back and a well-worn copy of Silent Spring tucked into my coat pocket. At home, Rachel was already planning a Paul's redemption roast. A follow-up party. New jokes. Real closure. Bobby's ice cream cake. I found the flyer in the trash the day before. The RSVP list was growing. She didn't even ask why I was home early. Just yelled from the kitchen, "Don't forget the cleaning lady is coming tomorrow. Try not to leave your boring papers all over the table again." That night, while she snored, I pulled my old briefcase from the closet, dusted it off, and opened the small false bottom I'd built out of sheer paranoia years ago. Inside, a hard drive, a burner phone, some cash, sealed envelopes, and a folded sticky note with a name and an address I hadn't thought about in years. I stood by the bed for a long moment. She snorted in her sleep, rolled over, and mumbled, "You should smile more, Paul. It's just a joke." I left before the sun came up. No goodbye. No note. When Rachel came downstairs the next morning, saw the front door ajar, and the cold coffee maker, she probably thought I'd just gone for a walk. She wouldn't realize I wasn't coming back until her friends started texting her. "Is Paul okay? He seemed weird last night." By the end of the week, she'd be fielding questions from reporters, HR, the legal department, the mayor's assistant. Everyone wanting to know what the hell had happened. But by then, I had already erased Paul Hall from existence. The cake sat in the breakroom fridge for 3 days before someone threw it out. Happy 62nd, Paul, it read, with a fondant clipboard. No one touched it. Not out of respect. Paul was no longer a man people respected, but because no one wanted to be caught eating a piece of the scandal. On the Monday after the roast, my office was sealed. Literally. The glass door had a sticky note, temporarily closed for audit. Everyone knew what it meant. My nameplate was gone. My inbox returned all messages. Delivery failed. User unknown. My chair was gone too, replaced by a folding stool. As if even the furniture was being disciplined. Rachel woke up alone that morning. Not alone as in I got up early, but alone as in my side of the closet was empty. No dress shoes. No ties. The watch I wore for 20 years, a dull silver fossil with the face scratched near the 11, was gone from the tray by the sink. I'd taken exactly 3 things: the watch, the brown leather briefcase with the cracked handle, and a small black umbrella that had belonged to my father. I left behind 2 wedding albums, a bottle of heart medication, and a manila folder labeled house deed. Rachel found it on the kitchen table. Signed. Notarized. Filed. The property transferred. The mortgage paid off. 0 debt. The house was hers. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there in a tank top and pajama pants, clutching a coffee mug that said, "Yes, I'm still the boss." She read the paperwork 3 times, her hands trembling slightly with each page turn. Then, with an almost childlike disbelief, she said aloud to no one, "He's really gone." No note. No dramatic scene. No final fight. No suitcase thrown in anger. No, "You'll regret this." He had just left. By Wednesday, the whispers began. Linda from zoning said I was having a nervous breakdown. A city maintenance guy claimed he saw me at the Greyhound station in jeans, getting on a bus to somewhere flat. Rachel's Pilates buddy heard from someone at the bank that I'd liquidated everything. All accounts, completely emptied. On Friday, Rachel went to the office herself. Navy blazer, best smile. Croissants for the secretaries. She knocked on the mayor's door, all poise and confidence. "Just coming to clear the air," she said with a little laugh. "You know, Paul, he gets moody sometimes. He'll turn up." The mayor didn't look up. "We're handling it internally." Rachel asked what that meant. He finally looked up, his expression a mix of pity and irritation. "It means we've moved on. I suggest you do the same." By the end of the next week, Rachel's calendar was empty. Lunches stopped. Texts slowed. People at the co-op smiled too quickly, laughed too loudly, tried too hard not to mention the elephant that had once been her husband. She called my sister in Oregon. "Have you heard from him?" A pause. Then Rachel hung up. Every night she reread old emails, searching for a clue. Something angry, something broken. Nothing. My last message to her, 2 days before the party, had been a shared calendar invite. Waterboard meeting, 3 p.m. Friday. That was it. That was Paul. Boring. Predictable. Tedious. Just as she had so lovingly said. But boring men don't just disappear like ghosts. They don't erase themselves completely in a single day. They don't leave behind perfect paperwork and untraceable exits. Not unless they've been preparing. At the end of the month, a 3-sentence statement appeared on the mayor's website. "In light of recent events, we reaffirm our commitment to professionalism and respect in all departments. We regret the circumstances surrounding Mr. Hall's departure. No further comment is available at this time." Rachel read it 5 times. Nowhere did sorry appear. Nowhere did wrong appear. She scrolled down, saw the next announcement, renovations to the Civic Auditorium. I'd been assigned that project. Now, another name was listed. A younger man. No mustache. No history. She called the planning department. "This is Rachel Hall. I need to speak to someone about Paul." "Who?" "My husband, Paul Hall. He worked in planning. I'm his wife." A pause. Then, with surgical neutrality, "I'm sorry, we have no record of any active employee by that name." Click. That night, she opened a bottle of wine and laughed. Just once. A small, dry sound. It was all so absurd. Paul, who once worked up a sweat arguing about overdue library books, had somehow become radioactive. The next morning, her friend Dana texted, "Hey, weird thing. Did you by any chance use my work email to send that slideshow?" Rachel stared at the message, her stomach clenching. Months before the party, she'd gotten the idea from a viral meme. She downloaded the template at Dana's house because her laptop was acting up. She had completely forgotten. "I might have," she texted back. "Why?" Dana didn't reply for hours. Then, "We just got a letter from someone's lawyer. Our IT department found the file on our shared drive." "Rachel, what exactly was on that thing?" Rachel didn't answer. She was too busy staring at a formal letter in her mailbox. Certified mail. Cream-colored paper. No return address. The letterhead was clean. The wording icy, alleged defamatory materials created and disseminated by parties under your direct supervision. It was from a law firm she'd never heard of, but the tone was clear. Someone had sued. Or was about to. She called Dana, straight to voicemail. Called the rest of the party team, Sarah, Sin, Jean. Suddenly, no one was picking up. Jean had blocked her on social media. Another had deleted all tagged photos from the roast. Gone. Rachel tried to post something casual, a lunch picture with a new group of moms. 0 comments. 1 like, probably a bot. Her inbox was a graveyard. Even her mother texted, "Ratch, maybe you should lay low for a while." Her stomach twisted again. Then came the real blow. Paul's pension stopped. The payments that trickled into their joint account, because, of course, I never changed the deposit info, they just stopped. No notification. No explanation. When she called the city's payroll office, she was transferred 3 times before landing in the voicemail of someone named Janine. No one called her back. She finally called the number on the legal letter, her hand shaking. A smooth voice answered. "Yes, this is Rachel Hall," she said. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No, the voice replied. "There has been documentation. I don't understand what this is about." The voice was calm, measured. "It's about consequences, Miss Hall." Silence. Rachel stared at her phone for almost a minute before setting it down. She walked to the kitchen, opened the pantry, and stared at the shelves, cans, boxes, jars. Nothing made sense. She sat on the floor, trying to breathe. The joke, the one she thought was harmless, even funny, was unraveling her life thread by thread. Her smug little roast had gone from party conversation starter to a potential lawsuit. Her friends were scattering. Her money was drying up. And Paul hadn't said a word. That was the worst part. She hadn't seen his face. She hadn't heard his voice. She hadn't read even a single passive-aggressive email. He had simply erased himself. And somehow, in that silence, he was becoming louder than ever. The investigator's name was Kelvin Dorsey. His office was in a strip mall next to a vape shop and a decaying martial arts dojo that doubled as a tax prep service. He wore a corduroy jacket with suede elbow patches and had a mustache so deliberate it looked like a costume. Rachel didn't care. She just wanted someone, anyone, who could find her ex-husband. "I want to be very clear," she said, sliding a photo of me across the desk. "He's not dangerous. He's just wrong. This isn't revenge. I just need closure." Kelvin gave her a slow nod, as if he'd heard that 100 times. He flipped the photo over, squinted at it. "This is all you have?" "I have some old addresses, some bank information, his social security number." "Good. I'll run it through my systems. Might take a few weeks." She paid in cash. Part of what was left from the sale of her car, the one I bought her 2 years before the roast. Now she was taking Ubers to the Pies office and walking 3 blocks in the drizzle to get there. 3 weeks later, Kelvin called. "Miss Hall, we've got some pings, but nothing solid." "What does that mean?" "It means he either has friends in very high places, or he planned his exit like a military operation." He paused. She didn't speak. Nothing in the DMV, no employment records, no IRS activity under his SSN. The only hint was a debit card withdrawal, $1,200 cash, 2 days after his party. An ATM near a gas station on the outskirts of Lincoln, Nebraska. That's it. Could he be dead? She asked quietly. No body, no death certificate. He's alive somewhere. Rachel sat on her couch that night, wrapped in the Afghan her sister had crocheted, sipping ginger tea, endlessly scrolling through forums like Runaway Spouses Anonymous and Ghost Marriages. Most were about cheaters, secret families, cults. None sounded like Paul. He was too boring for that. Or maybe, she thought, that's exactly what made him dangerous now. A week later, Dana texted her out of the blue. "Don't freak out, but a friend swears she saw Paul." Rachel almost dropped her phone. "Where?" "At a truck stop outside of Billings. Mopping floors. Night shift." Rachel stared at the message, fingers hovering. Then she called Kelvin. He was already 2 steps ahead. "I sent a guy out there, talked to the manager. They had someone matching his description, but the name was fake. No W-2. Paid under the table for a few weeks, then disappeared again. He left a locker with nothing in it except a copy of The Grapes of Wrath and a toothbrush. Anything else?" "Yeah," Kelvin said. The locker number was 62. Paul's age. Rachel hung up and threw her phone across the room. It didn't break. Of course, it didn't. Even her rage had bad aim these days. Over the next month, the clues got weirder. One of Kelvin's friends saw me on a fishing boat in Oregon with a full beard, calling myself Evan. Another claimed I was working as a handyman at a retreat center in Sedona, smelling of pine needles and regret. Each time, Rachel gave chase. Each time, it fell apart. She started dreaming about me. In the dreams, I never spoke. I just stood in the background, watching her as she struggled through rooms slowly filling with water. Sometimes I'd tilt my head, slightly amused, like I knew something she didn't. She sold the house 3 weeks later. Not out of necessity, not yet. But she couldn't stand the echo of the place. Every room whispered my name. The guest bathroom still had that weird towel rack I'd installed crookedly in 2008. The garage smelled like my cologne and motor oil. The pantry still had my favorite hot sauce, unopened. She'd once mocked me for it. You like things bland, Paul. Even your taste buds are boring. Now she stared at the bottle as if it might hold a clue. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. 2 bedrooms, grey carpet, no history. She filled the walls with abstract art she didn't understand and candles that smelled of eucalyptus and self-deception. Dana came over once, took one look at the minimalist furniture and said, "You're living like you're trying to erase your own memory." Rachel didn't answer, just poured wine. After Dana left, Rachel sat alone and pulled up an old video on her laptop. She and I, in New Orleans years ago. Bourbon Street in the background. Me, in a ridiculous straw hat, holding a bayonet like it was a national treasure. I turned to the camera and said, "Sometimes disappearing is the only way to be seen." She had laughed then, thinking it was a joke. Now she wasn't so sure. No forwarding address. No closure. No control. Just an ex-husband who had turned silence into a whole second life and had left her lost in the noise of her own making. The town was small enough to be ignored by maps, big enough to hide in. Grain elevators, dollar stores, and a quiet after 9 p.m. A man with a name that didn't belong to anyone famous or hunted, Eli Olin. No middle name. No social media. No paper trail beyond a forged birth certificate and a P.O. box 3 counties away. He chose the name like a surgeon chooses a scalpel, deliberately, with clean edges, and a purpose buried deeper than it seemed. He walked into the warehouse in the middle of January with a cold so sharp your spit would crack before it hit the ground. The job paid $12 an hour and included steel-toed boots and a neon vest that reeked of nicotine and machine oil. The hiring manager didn't ask questions. Small towns are like that. If you show up with a work ethic and clean fingernails, they assume your story is the least interesting thing about you. Paul worked nights. He requested it. Fewer eyes. The night shift was full of veterans who didn't care who you were as long as you stacked pallets without crushing your toes or pissing off the forklift guys. He started quietly. He counted inventory with a precision no one asked for. He reported leaks in the roof no one else noticed. He fixed a broken label printer in his 3rd week using nothing but an old paperclip and a YouTube video. He didn't speak unless spoken to. He didn't eat lunch with the crew. He didn't participate in the birthday cake rituals. But he listened. He listened when the dock supervisor complained that trucks were idling too long because the scheduling was a mess. He listened when the inventory manager cursed the outdated software. He listened when the dispatchers argued about mislabeled orders and delayed deliveries. Then one night, he wrote a letter by hand. No signature. Just a list. Implement a barcode system to reduce error rate by 22%. Reorganize storage layout to reduce forklift traffic by 37%. Use temperature sensors on high-value perishable goods. Losses of $100,000 last quarter. He slid it under the office door and went back to loading tiles. 3 weeks later, a clipboard appeared with a new layout diagram. No announcement. Just changes. He kept writing letters every 2 weeks. Always anonymous. Always actionable. He was finally called into the office by the owner, Curtis Redner, a man who wore a bow tie and spoke in riddles. "Are you the ghost who's fixing my problems?" Curtis asked. Paul shrugged. "I guess ghosts don't talk." Curtis nodded once. "You want to supervise the floor?" Paul shook his head. "Let me stay where I am. I see more from the bottom." Curtis stared for a long moment, then grunted. A smart ghost. 2 years later, Paul had a name tag, not just a vest. He still worked nights, but now he walked the floor with a tablet and a new title, Night Operations Coordinator. He made $37,000 a year and turned down every offer to move to day shift. By the 3rd year, Curtis invited him to meetings. By the 4th, Paul rewrote the logistics chain for the entire Western Corridor, cutting delays in half and trimming 30% of labor waste. By the 5th year, he was given the title of Regional Operations Director. 3 states. 9 facilities. He was making 6 figures. Still no LinkedIn. Still no photos. Still no social media. He bought a modest house near a lake with a long gravel driveway and a reinforced mailbox. He had his groceries delivered and paid with cash tips. He ate lentils and rice. Drank black coffee. He ran 5 miles every morning at 4:30 a.m. He never missed a day. He registered an LLC under the name Holland Systems. By the 6th year, He had started quietly buying up shares in Curtis's company through a network of trusts and shell companies. Nothing illegal. Just untraceable. He never used a personal email. Never signed his real name. When Curtis had a stroke in the 7th year and the board was scrambling for stability, the votes fell to the man with no scandals, no debt, and no enemies. The silent operator who had never asked for recognition, never broke protocol, and never, ever left a trail. Paul Hall became the CEO of Redner Logistics under the name Eli Olin. No press release. No ribbon cutting. But in the internal memo sent to department heads across the state network, there was a brief note. New CEO effective immediately. Proven track record. No further introduction needed. And so the man everyone laughed at, the man everyone had seen publicly humiliated, now owned the company that had once paid him by the hour to scrub diesel stains off concrete floors. His office was simple. No pictures on the desk. No awards on the walls. Just a bookshelf. One item rested on it, a cracked white ceramic coffee mug with faded blue letters, World's Okayest Urban Planner. He never mentioned it. Never explained it. But every time he looked at it, something in his eyes hardened slightly. Outside that office, Rachel was scrolling through her dwindling contact list, wondering which bridge had collapsed next. She had no idea that the man she had erased was quietly writing the blueprints of his empire. And he wasn't finished. It was a Tuesday, a day so ordinary it goes unnoticed, unless something breaks it, like an egg on hot pavement. Rachel was in line at the pharmacy, scrolling through her phone to avoid eye contact with the overly talkative woman behind her, when her thumb froze mid-swipe. She didn't know why the headline caught her eye. It wasn't flashy or dramatic. Just, the quiet man behind a booming infrastructure empire, the unusual rise of P. Olin. It was in the Midwest Executive Leader, some regional business publication that had probably been algorithmically recommended based on her past searches for how to track shell corporations and what happens when a spouse disappears. She almost scrolled past it. Almost. But then she saw the grainy photo, blown up from a distance, probably taken at a company event. The man wasn't looking at the camera. He was talking to someone, half-turned, a drink in one hand. But the posture, the bearing, it was him. Her knees didn't buckle. That would have been cinematic. What happened instead was worse. She dropped her coffee. No, the cup. The whole thing. The paper lid. The sleeve. She just let go of it, as if her brain had temporarily forgotten what hands were for. It hit the tiled floor with a dull thud, splattering her shoes. No one noticed, because, well, this was a pharmacy, and everyone was already annoyed with their own problems. She didn't even apologize, just walked out with her phone still in her hand, ignoring the cashier calling after her. You forgot you're good. She sat in her car, the door still open, and zoomed in on the photo until the pixels blurred together. The eyes. Paul always had this weird habit of squinting slightly when he listened, as if he was calibrating your emotional frequency before deciding if you deserved a response. The photo showed that exact expression. A slight squint. The barest hint of a wry smile. No joy. No arrogance. Just containment. She read the article 3 times. It talked about P. Olin as a disruptor in infrastructure investment, about his obsession with efficiency, anonymity, and systems that outlived personalities. About how he had quietly acquired a controlling interest in multiple logistics companies, construction firms, and rail tech providers. It called him a ghost on paper, a myth in boardrooms, a king among engineers. There were no quotes from him, no direct interviews. Just analysts speculating and an anonymous executive who called him the architect of the invisible. Rachel blinked hard, her breath fogging the window. She opened a group chat she hadn't used in a year, the one for the roast team, sparkling wine glass emojis and all, and typed, Rachel, has anyone ever heard of a guy named P. Olin? Kaylin, no. Who? Sarah, sounds fake. Rachel, I think it's Paul. Dana, the guy from the article? Haha, you're reaching, Rachel. Rachel, no, look at this. Look at his face. She pasted the link. Seen. Typing. No one replied. She called her sister. He's alive, she said without preamble. He's rich. And I think he planned this. What are you talking about, Rachel? Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper, as if the dashboard could hear her. Paul. That article. He didn't just disappear. He rebuilt himself. Ratch, it's been years. Let it go. But Rachel wasn't listening anymore. She spent the next 48 hours spiraling. Reverse image searching. Digging into company records. Pulling up addresses, board memberships, flight records. Even the LLCs tied to Holland systems. Most led to PO boxes or third-party proxies. But one document, a minor utility merger approval buried in a state database, showed a signature P. Edward Olin. Her pulse spiked. Paul Edward. She remembered writing that middle name on their marriage license. He hated it. Said it sounded like a dead president. The signature wasn't scanned. It was wet ink, scanned after the fact. A real signature. And the handwriting, his precise, slightly right-leaning slant, like someone marching uphill. She stared at it for hours. The next morning, she went to an old friend's office, a lawyer who owed her a favor. She put the article and the signature on his desk. Find out everything you can. He looked at her, eyebrows raised. Rachel, why? I need to know how far he's gone. Why? She didn't answer, just said, send me the bill. Later that night, she pulled up the roast video from her cloud storage. The one she hadn't watched in years. The one that started it all. Her voice echoed through the speakers as the slideshow played. Each fake text and doctored image accompanied by the crowd's laughter. She watched herself, radiant, smug, drunkenly proud. And then she paused the video. Paul's face. Blank. Stone-like. Not embarrassed. Calculating. She rewound, played it again, watched the exact moment something in his expression broke. Not from pain, but from clarity. Not a how could you, but a so this is who you are. She stood there staring at that frozen frame as the ice in her wine glass melted. It hit her like a freight train. He didn't just leave. He transformed. And every step, the silence, the disappearance, the second life, it wasn't a reaction. It was a master plan. The building didn't look like revenge. It looked like control. All glass and steel, like a blade stuck into the skyline. Not the tallest in the district, but the sharpest. Designed to reflect the sun so brutally that anyone who got close had to squint. The kind of building that didn't need to scream power because it had been engineered to ignore you. Rachel stood before the revolving doors in a tailored black coat and imitation heels that already hurt her feet. The taxi ride had been silent. She'd spent the entire trip rehearsing lines in her head. Firm, but kind. Calm, but direct. She wasn't there to make a scene. She was there for a conversation. A closure. Maybe, if she allowed herself the fantasy, an apology. Inside, the lobby was silent marble and conditioned air that smelled faintly of eucalyptus and money. A fountain trickled behind the reception desk. Everything was smooth, polished, clinical. She walked to the desk, her heart pounding. Hi, I'm here to see Mr. Olin. Tell him Rachel is here. The receptionist didn't look up. Do you have an appointment? No, but he'll want to see me. I'm Rachel Hall. I'm afraid Mr. Olin doesn't take walk-ins. Rachel leaned forward. He'll make an exception. Just tell him it's Rachel Hall. Now the woman looked up. Not a flicker of recognition, not a blink of surprise. Just professional impassivity. The corporate equivalent of a padded cell. I suggest you take a seat or leave. Rachel pulled out her phone, scrolled through the gallery, and slapped it on the counter. A wedding photo. Paul in a cheap tuxedo. Her, in a sleeveless dress, laughing into the wind. That's your boss. And that's me. Tell him his wife is here. The receptionist glanced at the photo, then at the security guard quietly moving towards them. I'll have to ask you to lower your voice. I'm not raising it. Rachel snapped, though her voice cracked. I just want a 5-minute conversation. I'm not crazy. I'm not dangerous. He'll recognize me. The guard came closer. A burly man with an earpiece and a navy suit. She turned to him. Look, I don't want to make a scene, but I'm not leaving until... the guard said calmly. You need to step aside. He didn't threaten her. He didn't grab her. He just stood there like a mountain with policy in his veins. Rachel looked back at the receptionist, still impassive, still unmoved. You people don't even know him, she said, her voice now desperate. He used to quote bad sci-fi. He has a crooked pinky finger from a football injury in '78. He calls hot dogs tube meat, and he hates green peppers. I know him. He's not some cold investor robot. The receptionist stood up. That was the final shift. It was no longer about security. It was about cleanup. She said quietly, as if they were both embarrassed. If you don't leave the building, we're prepared to contact the legal department. Not security. Not the police. Legal. A word so corporate it felt like a steel door slamming shut inside Rachel's chest. The security guard took a step forward, just enough for her to understand it wasn't a bluff. She felt it then, fully. Not rage. Not shame. Just irrelevance. She wasn't even a red flag anymore. Just a footnote in a forgotten draft. Rachel backed away slowly, her hands raised slightly as if disarming a bomb. She didn't turn her back until she was through the revolving doors. Outside, the sunlight reflecting off the building's glass blinded her for a second. She stood there on the sidewalk, stunned, watching business people walk past without a glance. A courier whizzed by on an electric bike. A mother with a stroller went around her as if she were just another misplaced lamppost. Rachel pulled out her phone and called Dana. Voicemail. She texted her. I saw the building. It's real. It's all real. They wouldn't even let me go up. She stared at the message bubble. No reply. Later that night, in a hotel room 2 blocks away, she opened a bottle of wine from the minibar and sat cross-legged on the bed, scrolling through Google image results for Eli Olin. There were only a few, always blurry, always distant. The press called him notoriously private and inaccessible by design. One article said he was building something called a delegate archive, an internal AI-driven database to ensure the company's knowledge survived employee turnover. A system that remembered everything. She laughed bitterly. Even his software didn't forget. She zoomed in on a photo from a board meeting. 8 men, 2 women, all smiling, mostly middle-aged. Paul was slightly to the side, his hands folded, his expression neutral. Her thumb hovered over his face. He didn't look cold. He looked calm. As if the past were just an equation he had solved. She finished the bottle alone, uninvited, on the wrong side of the glass. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and embossed with no return address. It had that unmistakable weight, like something that had passed through too many selective hands. Rachel stared at it on her doormat for almost an hour before picking it up, not out of fear, but out of disbelief. Inside was a single card of thick cardstock with elegant lettering. The Olin Foundation is pleased to invite Rachel T., former spouse of Paul Olin, to the annual Founders Gala. She reread the line 3 times. Former spouse. There was no warmth in the phrase, no with appreciation, no in recognition of. Just a cold fact, labeled precise. She looked up, her heart pounding. For a moment, the entire apartment seemed to tilt. She leaned against the wall. Why now? Why her? Why this? She RSVP'd, yes. Before she had time to doubt it. She spent the next 12 days preparing like a soldier being deployed behind enemy lines. The dress was rented, a dark navy evening gown too tight in the ribs but expensive enough to pass inspection. The jewelry was fake. The clutch was borrowed. She paid for professional hair and makeup, pretending not to notice how the stylist paused for a beat when she said, "It's for a gala." How asking for you. Rachel stood outside the venue alone. A grand marble hall that glowed from within. Soft golden light spilled through arched windows. The muffled sounds of jazz and champagne corks barely reached the street. Her old circle, what was left of it, was waiting in a car a block away, engine running. They didn't want to be seen. Not yet. Are you sure you want to go in there? Dana had asked. Rachel had simply felt it. He invited me. She walked to the entrance slowly. 2 valets stood near the door with straight backs, their gazes forward. One took her name. Rachel T., she said. The man checked the list, nodded briefly, and stepped aside. No ceremony. No welcome. No red carpet smile. Just a signal. The signal was clear, she could enter, but she was not welcome. The moment she stepped inside, she realized how badly she had misjudged the scale of it. This wasn't a corporate cocktail party. It was an orchestration. Live jazz floated through the air like silk. Chandeliers glittered above towering floral arrangements. Waiters moved like synchronized dancers, offering flutes of champagne and spoonfuls of truffle with words like essence and cured on volcanic salt. The guests were radiant, dressed in designer gowns, tuxedos with lapel pins that whispered old money. And there, across the room, at the very center of the orbit, was Paul. She recognized him instantly. Slim. Measured. With silver hair, perfectly cut. No flash. No vanity. Just impeccable. He wore a midnight black suit with a charcoal vest, and stood among a semicircle of investors and foundation directors who hung on his every word. He laughed slightly, politely, as if what had been said wasn't particularly funny, but he allowed it for their benefit. Then he turned and saw her. His expression didn't change. Not a twitch. Not a blink. Just a flicker of recognition. She felt her chest tighten. Not from shame, she had already crossed that ocean, but from the sudden, suffocating realization that he seemed complete. Not cold. Not bitter. Just finished. She stood by the wall for 15 minutes, pretending to admire the architecture. No one approached her. Even the waiters passed her by with practiced indifference. Her phone buzzed. Dana, do you see him? She didn't reply. Instead, she drifted towards the silent auction area, where signed books and framed blueprints were lined up next to gleaming plaques with names she didn't recognize until one caught her eye. Legacy and Infrastructure, a vision of P. Olin. Her fingers brushed the edge of the plaque. A woman nearby murmured to her husband, he's so focused. He never gives interviews. A total mystery man. The husband chuckled. I heard he used to be a janitor somewhere in the Dakotas. Now he owns half the state's rail network. Rachel felt her stomach clench. They didn't know. They didn't need to know. To them, Paul Olin had always been a man who appeared out of nowhere. Already powerful. There was no before. No roast party. No slideshow. No humiliation in a wine bar. Just the after, polished and invulnerable. She turned and found him watching her. Not staring, just noticing. He said something to the group next to him and started walking towards her. The crowd didn't part. It receded. Rachel's pulse thundered in her ears. As he got closer, her mind went blank. She had imagined this moment 100 different ways, reunions with yelling, with apologies, with guilt or redemption or just emotion. But now, face to face, there was nothing in his eyes but a clear, practiced detachment. No hate. No love. Just distance. He stopped a few feet from her. "Rachel," he said, like someone noting a weather pattern. "Hall," she replied, her throat dry. "You came." I didn't know what to expect." He nodded, as if that answer didn't matter. Then he checked his watch. "Enjoy the gala," he said and turned. She almost grabbed his sleeve. Almost. But the distance between them wasn't a few feet. It was years. And that night had a name, legacy. She waited until most of the guests had turned towards the stage for some kind of speech. Something about legacy grants, scholarships, urban revitalization. A woman in a dress that cost more than Rachel's car tapped a crystal glass and thanked the Olin Foundation not just for building, but for believing. Camera flashes went off. A slow, respectful applause rippled through the ballroom. Paul was near the back now, sipping something expensive from a short glass, half listening, alone again. Always slightly distant. Even here, even now, with the room practically vibrating in his honor, he remained a breath outside of it. Rachel moved towards him slowly, cautiously, as if approaching a wolf she once mistook for a dog. He turned slightly at the sound of her heels on the marble. "How?" His expression didn't change, just that neutral recognition, the way he would look at an old receipt before throwing it away. She stood beside him, barely breathing. "I have to ask," she said, her voice low. "How did you do all of this? After what we..." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have the words. Or maybe she didn't have the courage to say the one thing she had avoided saying for years. "After what I did to you." Paul looked at her then, not through her, but at her. Measured. Quiet. That same slight squint he used to give city contractors when their budgets didn't add up. "You gave me something," he said calmly. Her eyes darted back and forth, searching his face. "What?" He leaned in slightly. Not intimately. Clinically. "Total failure," he said. "You gave me that. No one else dared." She blinked. He took another sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving hers. "It burned away everything I was. All the scaffolding. The reputation. The safety net. Every illusion about who I thought I was and what I thought people would never do to me." He let the words hang for a beat. "I was clean. Hollowed out. With nothing left to lose." Rachel's throat tightened. "I never meant for it to go that far." "No." The question landed harder than she expected. He tilted his head. "It was a joke," she said quietly. "That's what you told yourself. But I saw you laugh, Rachel. Not at the slideshow. At me. That night wasn't for the guests. It was for you." She opened her mouth, closed it again, swallowed. "You didn't stop. People don't destroy what they're afraid to lose. They destroy what they've decided no longer matters. I was a piece of furniture that annoyed you. Sturdy. Predictable. You needed to prove it had a crack." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. He moved past her towards the edge of the ballroom, as if the moment had passed. As if it meant nothing. She followed him. "Why invite me here?" she asked, desperation seeping in. "Why now?" He turned slowly. The chandelier lights reflected off his glass, catching the rim like a blade. "To show you what failure can build." Her heart hammered. "Is this revenge?" He looked her straight in the eye. "No," he said. "It's restoration." That word landed like a slap. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just the act of putting something back in its proper place, with no sentimentality, no apology. He turned away again, but Rachel wasn't ready to let him go. She moved closer, her voice trembling. "I was wrong. I was stupid. I thought it was funny. I didn't know." Paul's eyes narrowed. "You didn't know what? That this would cost." There was the first honest thing she had said in a decade. He looked at her for a long, quiet moment, as if trying to decide if this version of her deserved a response. If there was any part of her left that could still understand. Then, calmly, quietly, "You didn't destroy a man, Rachel. You released one." And with that, he turned completely, walking back towards the crowd, towards the donors and board members and photographers who only knew him as the architect of something massive and enduring. Rachel stood there alone, under a chandelier. Older than her marriage, clutching her imitation handbag like a life raft, slowly, painfully realizing that she still didn't understand what she had broken. Because it wasn't a man. It was a boundary. And now the version of Paul she once knew, the one who bought her wine she didn't drink and stayed quiet when she mocked him, was gone. And what stood in his place owed her nothing. The reality of it hit her like a cold, still, unforgiving indictment. Rachel stumbled out of the marble hall, her heels clicking unevenly on the stone steps. She saw Paul near the curb, lit by the soft amber glow of a street lamp. He was alone, as always. No entourage. No assistants. Just a man in a perfectly tailored suit who wore silence like a weapon no one saw coming. She hesitated in the doorway, her heart hammering against her ribs. The music from inside was muffled now, reduced to a distant echo, like the sound of a past she couldn't return to. Her rented dress was too tight, her jewelry too gaudy. Her whole body trembled, though she couldn't tell if it was from the cold, the humiliation, or the gravity of everything she had just heard. She took a step, then another. "Paul," she called softly, her voice cracking against the darkness. He didn't turn. She reached him just as he adjusted his coat, preparing to leave. Is this revenge? He finally turned, his eyes steady, his expression unreadable under the streetlight's glow. "No," he said calmly, like someone answering a routine question. "It's clarity." She swallowed. Her throat was raw. "Then why invite me?" He looked past her for a long moment, past the glowing building, past the journalists still milling around by the valet line, past the place where they once played house and called it love. Then, finally, back to her eyes, "So you could see the man you created. And the man you lost." The sentence hit like a whip. Simple. Precise. Rachel took a half step back. Her knees buckled. She sank slowly onto the curb, her fingers splayed on the stone as if to hold herself up, but there was nothing to hold on to. Her breath hitched. She shook her head once, twice. "No," she whispered. "No, it can't be true." But it was. Because what stood before her was not just a rebuilt man. It was a monument. One she had helped to build. Not with love or loyalty, but with fire and failure. A sculpture shaped by abandonment, sharpened by erasure, polished in solitude. Paul, Eli Olin, gave her one last look. Not of pity. Not of cruelty. Just of acknowledgement. And then he walked. Not away in anger. Not away in triumph. Just forward. Past her. Past the past. Without a word. Without a pause. Without a single backward glance. Rachel remained on the curb, her hands limp in her lap, mascara running down her cheeks, the night air swallowing her sobs. The lights of the Gala behind her flickered, and ahead in the quiet, his footsteps faded. Steady. Certain. Untouchable. She had her answer. She had her clarity. And it destroyed her. This story is just, wow. It's a gut punch, right? What would you have done if you were Paul, facing that kind of public humiliation and betrayal? Or, if you were Rachel, experiencing the slow, agonizing unraveling of your life because of one joke? I really want to know what you think of this ending. Let me know in the comments below.